Today's workshop is, or today's discussion is about GPT. It's written wrong on here. uh, let's do a quick poll. Who's using ChatGPT already? So maybe half the audience. Who uses it every day? Yeah, probably a third. Yeah. And so the others just don't want to put their hand up, or they haven't sort of seen it yet, or but certainly my involvement and Tony's involvement in the AI Hub, it's coming up a lot in discussions. It's very topical at the moment. Let's kick off with an introduction of our panelists today. We might get them to give a brief introduction, but I'll start off left to right. Tony Pegram, and I give you the...
Hello, I'm Tony Pegram. We live here on the Gold Coast and we have for a long time. I'm currently running the Queensland Artificial Intelligence Hub up at the Valley, and I do a lot of other work around health consultancy. So I've got a bit of both hats. Previously, I was here working in Gold Coast Health doing policy, strategy and asset management and building things.
Yeah, good morning. Is that working? No? No? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Tony's my wife. I'm a principal on the Gold Coast, so I've been there about 7 years. It's a very large school. It's got about 240 staff, about 2,350 students and growing. And obviously technology has taken on massive prominence and importance in education. It's just how quickly the systems are prepared to adapt and evolve and come to what is the latest iteration. ChatGPT is such a massive shift in how we conduct business. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what questions you have this morning and to see how we're embracing ChatGPT and yeah, get your insights and thoughts about that. Thanks.
Just see if this works. Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Dalton. Very close to the mic. How's that? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Steve Dalton. Many of you might know me from other things I've done in the past, so things like TechSpace. Lots of people come up to that, but at the moment, I guess I'm very focused on my own business, which is called Refactor. We're a bunch of software developers here on the coast, working on lots of different things, including AI, but not just AI, lots of things. And I work with Kelvin on all sorts of other crazy projects up in northern Queensland, so it's fun times at the moment.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. Well, let's kick off with some initial questions to the panel. The first one is, Steve, I challenge you as a technologist to give the audience an explanation on what ChatGPT is, but maybe in a way that's decipherable to the non-technologist.
GPT's actually been around for some time. I guess just ChatGPT in recent times has become topical because it got released to general public and they gave it a chat interface. So many of you are probably using it and you're not technologists. There's lots of people in marketing use it. It's all over LinkedIn. Some people I know that are using it that really don't even know how to use a computer, but they can use ChatGPT because it's a chat interface where you chat with the AI. And it's basically on a large language model, they call it. It's trained on a large amount of data from the internet and all sorts of other places. They claim there's all sorts of partnerships and data partnerships where this thing has got its source or oracle of information. But it's also listening to you. When you're chatting to it, you're actually training it as well, and you're actually guiding it, or they call it steering. You're actually steering it in different directions as well. So it's starting to this is probably for us to talk about later, but we're getting quite close now to something called AGI, which people have thought was going to be 10, maybe even 20 years away. And we're now getting this very massive, I guess, layering, recursive technology improvement happening now with GPT. So there's GPT-3, GPT-3.5, which is what ChatGPT was originally released with, now GPT-4, and then probably 5, 6, 7, 8, right the way up. But it's basically a large language model you can interact with, ChatGPT with a chat interface, which has got a lot of people worried because, you've got a principal here, kids are getting on there pretty easily. People are using it to chat with their friends without their friends maybe even knowing. So it's pretty interesting. I'll leave it that to the next person.
Cool, thank you. Maybe we switch to Tony. Tony, you're in the AI Hub, you're having to do a lot of translation between the technology people and the business and community people. So what do business people and community people think it is and how it might be used?
There's a real varied response to what ChatGPT is. There are the people who are off and running. So they look at it, they see what it can do for their business, and they're really ready to go. And then there's a whole group that go, chat what? So we do a lot of work with just telling people what ChatGPT does, but also what AI in general can do, how you're using it already, but also how you can get productivity and efficiency gains for your business. And for many people, they think about their business as the front end, the service delivery end. A lot of what we do is telling people about how you can support the back end of your business. And ChatGPT is one of those things where you can do a lot of work with a little amount of effort. Kelvin said, do I use it? I use it every day, but it's a thinking tool for me. So I write lots of reports, lots of information. I start off with a general question about how would I build a hospital in Brisbane that does this and what's the value? And it gives me an answer. And I go, be a bit more specific. I want an acute hospital. And it tells me that. I pick it up, I put it on the page, and now I can use that to write the rest of what I do. So what took me 4 hours takes me 1 hour. That kind of information is really important. But we also know that people are worried. And so we do a lot of work around what the risks, the benefits are, what's good about ChatGPT and what's not. So understanding that when you get a reference, that reference may actually not be real. You might actually have to go and check your reference list at the end because it's making it up as it moves along. We do a lot of work with business around how you can use it. And the things that you would think are knowledge recognition and recall, they're the kinds of things that are perfect for ChatGPT. But it can do English, it can do maths, it can do medicine, it can do all sorts of stuff.
Great, so maybe that's a good segue to Mark. Mark, if it can do all this stuff for us and take a lot of that sort of look up and research and, how do we use it in teaching and what are some of the things that maybe might change the way we assess or
It's interesting. EQ's response, Education Queensland's response is we'll just ban it. So it's a blanket ban with EQ across it on site. Of course, many people like myself go, this is just a really, really stupid response. What's happening, as we know, as Tony was talking about, is people are using it as a vehicle to start a project. They'll refine it and come back and work with it, but they're definitely using it at home. I'm finding a lot of my teachers, my heads of department, my deputy principals, as Tony was saying, document creation, using it at home. Can't use it on site, but definitely using it at home. Kids are doing it. The other big question mark for educational institutions, I'm talking about universities as well, is that assessment drives practice in learning organisations. So if you were a lecturer or a teacher, the first thing you want to do for your kids or your students is to work out what's the assessment going to look like. Otherwise, what do you teach? What do you actually effectively work with your students on? So assessment drives practice, and it's actually assessment that I think is actually under threat. I think in a great way. Assessment should have been challenged for the last 50 years, how we've assessed kids in education and universities with this one-on-one, sit at an assessment piece or at home working on an assignment and thinking it's being done in isolation and whatnot. So it's actually put a massive question mark and put a massive challenge to those organisations. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Education Queensland and private and state sectors, the assessment and the curriculum is actually written externally, not by EQ or by private sector. It's actually written by the QCAA, and they are very fearful or not really sure how to respond to what is ChatGPT and what it can provide. But a lot of the teachers and a lot of the kids are embracing it and going, let's run with this.
Yeah. So if we stay on that thread of, it can do a lot of that recall and regurgitating facts and information and sort of writing some of that initial prose. You sort of highlighted, well, what does that mean for how we assess skills and knowledge? But what do you think that implication is then for that broader thing about how we do work and and so on? Like, what do we value in terms of effort and whatnot?
So the cognitive development, those cognitive skills that we are most valuing, the days of recall, I mean, we'll still have people here and everywhere saying you need to know your times tables, you need to be able to recall this, well, really, we need to challenge that thinking. The ability to sit and learn large amounts of information, from my perspective, is not where we need to take young people. We need to teach people how to inference, how to cognitively digest material and synthesize material and read something and realize, and ChatGPT is a classic example of this. When you put your first question in there or your first comment and it spits out a number of paragraphs, so you say you've decided, give me 4 paragraphs about such and such, you still need the cognitive skills to sharpen what you get from that and then feed back into that commentary. So they're the skills that I think we need to start assessing. We don't, in Australia and a lot of our Western countries, assess how we work together. Like right now, we're working, if you like, as a forum. And I know that we have all partnerships in our working enterprise. I work with teams. And yet, as soon as it comes to assessment, it's a thing we do in isolation. It makes no sense to educators like myself. There's no social interaction that's actually evaluated between peers. So when you have a working group, we know there's the bludgers that lean on their shovels and just watch the hole getting dug. There's the people supervising. There's none of that development and social analysis of assessment. It is purely, as you've said, rote, learnt, recalled, and even mathematics and physics. I was a phys chem maths teacher. Even that now is quite capably done by ChatGPT. So even those things that they thought weren't particularly easy to resolve, that works quite easily done and can be in an exam scenario.
Yeah, I think I saw where it passed a fairly senior biochemistry entrance exam with really high levels. But maybe over to Steve. Steve, it's coming back with pretty good answers. Can we trust it?
I was just going to quickly say about the schools. My own kid's son's school, about a quarter of the kids maybe knew what ChatGPT was. My son knew what it was, but then the teachers rolled in and said, "This is banned." Now all of a sudden, every kid knows what it is, and they're using it for cheating, pretty much outright. Well, so rather than having a good discussion with them about ChatGPT and how just as you said, can be used, the kids are now genie's at the bottle now. They're all on it, and the teachers too. I don't know if anyone's seen the South Park episode with the ChatGPT one where the teacher's cheating. He's doing the marking too, and he's really happy with it until he finds out that people can text with it, and his boyfriend is like basically texting to him with ChatGPT, and then he gets really angry about it. But yeah, I think we have to be really careful the way we introduce these concepts to people, kids, but all adults. There's that concern about how we use it, but can we trust the information? Of course, yeah. So I'm using it at the moment on and off. I have to say, a lot of my staff are using it for coding, and they were actually really embarrassed at first that they were using it, and they didn't want to tell me. And then they knew I was cool about it. They're like, we're all talking about it a lot now, but we're quite regularly reviewing what it gives us. It can be wrong quite a bit with the coding, but also can give some really interesting insights. I've used it for checking my code quite a bit, but there's a bit of code that I've ran. It said, that's great. You've done a great job, Steve. And then I've ran it and there's runtime error because it hasn't detected that there's some code out of scope or something like that. But yeah, there's some good examples of it getting things pretty wrong. There's a lot of talk at the moment around bias and some stuff around political bias and, the way it's interpreting things. And, the world is already a bit of a crappy place with a lot of hate. Look at social media, which has had a lot of AI in it. And, there's people worried that this is going to potentially, cause a lot of problems, especially when it says, I am sure this is this. It doesn't always say, I'm 98% sure of that. Some of the responses are, I am sure it's this. So yeah, that's sorry. Yeah, go on.
What Steve's got is, what you need to understand is how it develops the answer. And it doesn't think, it just identifies what goes likely to be next. So it picks up the next word and the next word and the next word. So if I do it today and then I do it in 3 weeks' time, same question, I can get a different answer. There is no guarantee that what it thinks is the next thing is actually the next thing that should be there. It could be real, it could be fake, it could be an illusion. So it's you've got to remember it's not actually thinking yet. It's using an algorithm to identify what might come next logically. The more data you get, the better it gets. But it's still working on what comes next.
So, Tony, one of the concepts we chatted about is your previous role as a government executive is like writing ministerial briefings. Could we rely on it for something like that?
If I was still in that job, I'd be doing it. But you've also got to be careful about what it is you put in. So it's still learning. So Steve said it's still training on that. If I go, I'm in Queensland Health and I think I've got this thing that could be a bit of an issue and I want you to write me a brief that's a bit sensitive about blur, that's just gone into the machine. If Mark goes, I've got Pack Pines thing and I want to write something, you don't put Pack Pines in the title. You just say something a bit more vague because it can pick up whatever you take. That's now in your training model. That's out there.
Might
Okay.
mention the Samsung thing. Do you know about that?
No.
That happened recently. I'll quickly tell the story. So Samsung were feeding all of their meeting minutes into ChatGPT, not really thinking about like what would happen there, and ended up basically leaking all their lots of confidential private information to ChatGPT because they were just blindly feeding in their entire minutes into the thing. And then people were going and asking questions about Samsung, of course, right? And it was telling everything they needed to know.
So, so you sort of keep that, Tony, but you can see how the job's changing. Like the copy creator perhaps is disappearing. We don't need so many bloggers and things like that, but there's probably a bigger requirement for copy editors and whatnot. Do you think that'll change over time, or do you think that displacement there'll be, way less copy editors than copy creators, and there could be a sort of a reduction in jobs? Yeah.
I think at that entry level end, I think there is a discussion around those jobs not needing as many of them. I look at radiologists. You need a radiologist to look at an X-ray, but the models are getting really good. So how long do I need a radiologist for? It's proven that the human in the loop is still better, but I don't need as many humans in the loop anymore. The question that really needs to sit in your heads is, if I don't need as many humans, how do I get experience being the clever person who's the one who's doing not the copy editing? So I grew up sitting in writing boring ministerials and things, but that's how I learnt, well, that happens here and that happens there and that. So now when I critique a document, I can critique it based on my learning experience. What happens if you don't have that learning experience to get you to the end point? We need lots of people who've got that capability of learning and developing, and that's where the educational system's going to have to really shift. That displacement will happen, but you'll have to shift how you train through your organisation.
Yep. So, Mark, you talked about what you're changing in the education system around some of those skill sets, and kids are pretty much digital natives and adapt, but what do you think about their parents and how they might sort of adapt to this new world?
Look, the reality is we use a platform called DayMap. It's just something that allows assessment to be, parents to look at their kids' assessment, attendance, feedback and all that sort of thing. And the reality is we're seeing 10 to 15% of that being utilised by parents. So you're right. So parents are not as familiar with software, with how to use packages. If there's a social media incident and we talk to the parent, they have no idea what their kids are doing, what platforms are on, how they're utilising it. We've got teachers who are aged anywhere between early 20s through to 65 or thereabouts, and they vary in their skill sets on how to use this stuff. We've got our youngest daughter is just at UQ now, and the first thing they got beat up with, I would use the terminology they were beaten up with in their first lecture, was make sure you maintain your academic integrity by not using ChatGPT. That was within one of their first lectures. And of course, as you mentioned, as soon as you mention this product and academic integrity, people just want to know how to save time and work and pressure, and ChatGPT is that. So getting back to, how well do people understand? That is the challenge. Tony talked about it, is actually getting everybody to understand how to use this. The other thing I just want to add, just as I don't use it as technically as these folks either side of me, but what I find it does is it creates what I would call motherhood statements. So if you've ever heard a politician talk, They talk in terms of general motherhoods, what I call motherhood statements to make you feel good. That to me is currently where ChatGPT is. When I want it to do something, if I say write a speech for the Year 12 graduation, and I may use that as a starting template, I'll end up changing probably 70% of it, maybe a slightly more. But if you were to just read it, most of you'd go, oh, that's lovely. That's really nice. That's cool. It doesn't have any particularly connectivity to the particular site culturally, or to the school in particular, or to particular events that every student would know that year, that you can tie into your your conversation or your speech or your presentation. So ChatGPT still has a long way to go. As Tony said, the big challenge is to get teachers, parents to actually understand what it is, not ban it, but actually understand it's here. We've got to use it. We have to use it cleverly, but also realise it is definitely not the answer. I had a quick chat to Tony yesterday about this and said, if all we used was ChatGPT, we would stop thinking. If all we did for everything was just utilise that software, where's the thinking now? And we just literally printed that and sent that out to the respective clients or to teams or whatever, well, we stop thinking, don't we? So to me, and that stops ChatGPT from growing. Like you said, it's the input that actually it synthesises. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there's a lot of factors out there right now.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe we continue on that thread a little bit, Steve. What are some of the safety concerns and other challenges around this technology?
I'm really glad you mentioned AI safety, because even though I'm a technologist, I'm actually super worried about this, I'll be honest. And there's quite a lot of AI safety research out there, but it's way behind. So our collective wisdom, I guess you could call it, in the human side, is quite a bit behind now. The way that AI is developing very, very quickly, and it's funded. There's a lot of money involved in this now that's actually pushing this thing beyond what we can keep up with. So yeah, AI safety, I know some of the AI safety researchers, there was kind of 3 things that came up that they said we should never do with AIs. The first was we shouldn't really teach AI about human psychology too much and how to manipulate humans. We've totally failed at that, because we've released this thing on social media. And look what's happened. There's so much hate in the world now, and all sorts of manipulation happening in social media. We're seeing elections, people still arguing in the US about, who won elections. The second was, we shouldn't really teach AIs to code, because then they can potentially, change their own code. And we've taught AIs to code. They're coding pretty well. And then the third one, what was the third one? It was... yes, don't connect to the internet. And we have done that. Like GPT-4 is connected to the internet. There was a story recently where the person gave the AI a task, said you need to do this, and you should not reveal that you're an AI. And one of the first things the AI hit was I am not a robot capture, and said, oh, what am I going to do? It had actually some funds, and it went on to Freelancer and hired a human being. The human being asked it, are you an AI? You sound like you might be an AI. No, I'm not an AI. It lied. And hired this guy for $10 to fill in the capture so it could complete its task. So I know that's a small little example there, but extend that. I'd add a fourth one. We shouldn't give AIs bank accounts. I think once AIs get money and they can go online and negotiate things, I think we're in dangerous territory. So I can't remember your question, but in regards to AI safety, if you've got any young people in your groups and schools, I think it's a great area to get into, AI safety. I think, I guess it could be really good. It could also be really bad if you're an AI safety expert. The AIs are probably going to kill you off first when they become AGI. Always be nice to your AIs. Say please and thank you to Alexa, because when this thing becomes a superpower, if you're not polite, I think you're going to be the first to go. So be nice to the AIs. But AI safety, I know Calvin's company is involved in that quite a bit, so he might be able to shed some light on that. But I think it's a great area.
I always keep questioning, why do I keep asking ChatGPT, please can you do something? It's going to do what I ask it. Tony, over to you. What do you think exploring that safety concept?
I've been watching a whole group of people battle with AI safety, and the ones who battle the most with AI safety are our friends in the defence industry. So if you watch that blog and you watch that conversation that's going on, There's a whole lot of people go, yay, Ukraine, we're doing well, and others going, holy shit, if they can do that there, what does that mean for all forms of defence, and where is defence going, and what does that look like? So AI safety in itself is an issue, but also what we do with AI becomes an issue.
And having a health background, what about getting in my radiology report that I got from the doctor and getting a doctor ChatGPT interpretation?
So everyone understands now that whatever you've got, everyone knows, and it's all linkable. And the problem is that people worry about government linking things. The bigger problem is outside of government linking things, because the rules are far less robust. And while the EU is trying very hard, you can do that. And if you think about what you might not give away, but what someone else known to you might give away. So what if my daughter goes, oh, I've just had a genetic test and I have all of these issues. And then the AI links my genetic test to another relative's genetic test that links it back to me, that then goes, oh, I can't get insurance anymore. I don't know why. Wonder why that's the case. There's a lot of things around the safety and the use and the propagation of that data, and how AI can change and generate responses. But also, what if it gets it wrong? So we've already talked about the illusion of AI being safe and it coming up with the wrong answers. So what if it says I've got BRCA1 cancer gene? What if it's wrong and I don't have it? We've always got that issue with the human in the loop. But how do you, with a human in the loop, you can go and have a chat to the human and say, undo it. Once it's out there in a system, how do you undo it? What does that look like? So safety for AI is around data integrity, data safety, data security, what we do with it and how we let it move around systems. Someone last night said, can you ever be unseen? Can you ever have the right to not be seen on the internet? You take it off one place. Queensland Health's data systems are, 35 years old. People are flat out knowing what's in X box, Y box and Z box. Imagine trying to go around and delete a human across all of that just in one system. Really difficult.
Okay, well, what we might do is go out to questions to the audience. I think we've had some really good interpretation. I do request questions are really short. I know, including myself, you have a tendency. So I've set up a timer. We've got 1 minute per question, and I'm going to cut you off. So Harvey, 1 minute.
Few questions that you
can have one for 1 minute.
So let me ask only this one question. I believe everyone heard about the Watson project, the IBM Watson project, which is actually a leading AI system developed over the past probably 10 or 15 years with billions of dollars invested into it, and it has the FDA approval. So my question is whether you believe that ever ChatGPT, you'll be sued for billions if ChatGPT is your operator, unless it's FDA approval. And this links also to what do you think government intervention should be to regulate ChatGPT? Please.
So FDA approval isn't everything. And the question in healthcare delivery, there's a question about when is healthcare delivery requiring that kind of approval and when doesn't it? So we had a conversation with NDIS a little bit ago about how do you regulate AI for NDIS, because these are vulnerable people. And one of the problems we came up with is if we tried to regulate AI for NDIS, then NDIS people would miss out. So the example we used was, I'm at home and I've got a disability and I have an AI-enabled fridge, and that fridge knows what's in it, and that fridge then goes and tells Coles what I want, and then that rings up the drone deploy guys and they deploy it to my front door and they drop me my groceries. Could I buy that on the NDIS or not? Because technically it won't have gone through all of the assurance processes, it won't have gone through healthcare approval, but as a person with a disability, it'd be the best thing since sliced bread. So there's a balance between what you get approved as a medical device and what you get approved as an assistive device or a supportive device. And then it becomes a line about when is it an assistive device and when is it a medical device. That is under current discussion because that line is becoming quite blurred. It used to be really easy. You know, you put in a hip replacement, that's a medical device. I used to have a drip stand. That drip stand used to sit on its own. That drip stand now has an AI-enabled system sitting in it that helps me look at my drug library, find out what I'm going to put in and how I run that. Is that just a drip stand or is it a medical device or is it just an IT system? Even inside health, we have this conversation. When is an IT system a health system? And the line is very grey. Sort of answered your question, but not quite.
You didn't answer when will you get the billions to pay compensation if it is implemented the way you are proposing?
I think.
And then why not to spend the money and buy a test? And why to invent the wheel in the medical when you have what's already? Just spend the money.
So one of the other things that we're watching is a lot of little AI startups looking at ChatGPT going, oh, well, there was my product gone. So there's a whole group of startups who thought they had a really great idea and big business has taken it over. And that's the other concern is that small to medium startups are really going to struggle in the next little while to find their niche in the world.
We might go to the next question.
Yeah, just on the educational side, on the universities especially, when you're submitting assessments, I understand that Blackboard is a system that you submitted through. That was actually developed by ChatGPT as well. And they have a AI rating to see whether it's plagiarised. That's good at this early stage of this new technology. Is that true? Is that
Having.
real questions next?
Oh, okay. Well, my understanding at the moment is there's currently plenty of students using ChatGPT to submit assessment, admittedly modifying portions of it, but it's certainly being submitted as we speak.
But the Blackboard was made by ChatGPT as well.
Yeah, but as Tony said, the product changes. If you put the same question in literally I would argue 10 minutes later, it will look different to what was originally proposed.
Almost immediately. But the question I'm asking actually, well, I actually enjoyed the Three Presidents. Anybody's seen that? Where you actually write the script and then the voice is actually on President Trump, Biden. It's that's just going to destroy the advertising industry as that progresses. The point is, in a world of alternate realities, we've got Google, and Microsoft, etc., all developing this. Now, none of them are non-profit organisations. How soon is this going to be commercialised? Because what I look at, I analyse stocks, and you look at it and you say, well, what's the 10 best lithium stocks in Australia? What's the XYZ? Now you can see it already corrupted by the major banks in America assigning you to either buy or sell. The journey's out of the bottle. It's almost impossible for governments to keep control or monitor this. Now, if you're in China, your answer is going to be completely different than it is in Australia or America. If they're social scores, this is a major control technology for them. Does this thing all just turn into one big destructive technology, or is there at any stage a possibility that this can be controlled?
So,
monitored or?
yeah, as I spoke about before, the strange thing let's talk Queensland, because as you said, it's going to be different in probably New South Wales, all the different states and territories, as it will be in other countries. But currently in this state, the curriculum and the assessment is governed by the QCAA, which is a separate body to EQ. So in actual fact, and this is an irony that I've never understood myself, I work in an educational organisation that doesn't control the curriculum and assessment. A separate body does that. So in actual fact, EQ is at the mercy of what the development at which QCAA is going to create the assessment regime and what their answers are. So I know that Tony was in a forum just recently and I was having a bit of a chat to her about, and the QCAA were there. And there were questions posed exactly around this. When are you guys going to jump and realise this is something you got to? And the reality at the moment is they are scared. They're not sure what the answer is, because what you're actually doing in education, certainly in traditional Western educational settings, is you are potentially now changing the entire way in which we've assessed humans since you went to school. I'd guarantee you've all sat one-on-one with a pen and your paper or a laptop and done an exam or done an assignment at home, right? ChatGPT is throwing a question mark on whether or not the work is actually yours, isn't it? Which is meant to be the way of assessing. Yet my view is, how often do we actually singularly solve a problem? I've always felt, even when I was a young fella, as a child, that we should be assessing people in group dynamics, in problem-solving scenarios. But why do we do it that way? Because that's how it's always been done. And educational organisations are highly conservative, particularly the private sector, but highly conservative and traditional. So the last thing they want to do is break what they see as a successful business model, which is pumping kids through, getting them to sit that assessment well and get them into universities. Why do they want to corrupt that model? Why would you want to break that? So in answer to your question, it's the organisations that are controlling the assessment and a way in which we assess kids, that regime, that culture of a curriculum. If they finally make those changes, Education Queensland, if we just localise it, will have to respond. The teachers, the classrooms will have to respond to those mandates. I imagine it would be the same in China. Whatever organisation is governing the curriculum and assessment for schools at whatever that level is, once they jump, watch what they're doing and determine where to put your money, because that will then drive what happens in classrooms and lecture theatres.
Steve, and bringing that other question in,
as well.
you know, like they say OpenAI and Microsoft now owning this is a bit of a Google killer. You know, can we trust this commercial organisation now to really have this influence on the world without checks and balances?
OpenAI, I believe, was originally a non-profit, and it was going to be all open source, and then they said it was going to be, I think, capped commercial. No Microsoft involved. It's all commercial, and all the companies. I'd include Watson and all these guys all in the same bucket. Really, there's so many companies working on this now. The genie's at the bottle, I think you said. I think governments just got no chance of keeping up with this. It's a juggernaut. And like some people have described it as a a suicide race, which is a little bit worrying, but I can kind of see that. There's an open letter at the moment for a 6-month pause on training of large language models. I think the 6-month pause would do nothing. It's not pointless though, writing the letter, because I think it has actually brought about some really interesting discussion. People have been talking about this now actively on podcasts, social media, to even mainstream media. The pause, I don't think will happen. It just can't with commercial companies doing their thing. But yeah, I think we do need to talk about this. This is why it's really important when we have these discussions. We don't just talk about the technology. We do talk about ethics. We talk about the future of humanity, and some of the stuff might be pretty scary. I think some people are describing AI as both awesome and also terrifying. I think it's really important we talk about these things. This bigger picture of what is humanity, what is the future of humanity, what are these things going to actually do to our society. So the commercial thing, I think, is a problem. Money, right, creates all sorts of problems, right? Sorry, go on.
You're right.
Yeah, go on.
So if I take your point, at the moment you use your GPT, you cut and paste, you put it in. So if any of you have looked at what's coming with Copilot, not released yet, but coming, Microsoft embedded in Word, Excel, in PowerPoint, in Outlook, will have AI embedded. So if I'm sitting on my Word document, writing my Word document with AI enabling it, is that cheating or not? Because that's just using Word. If I'm doing that, how do you then discern when the AI isn't being used? Everyone uses Word. Everyone will use Copilot to help them do whatever. The line between when is it being generated as a discrete entity, you won't know. The other conversation we've been having with the universities and schools is, so how do you not create robo-debt? So, and the reason I say that is, think about software detection devices that basically said you're plagiarising. Back in the old days when plagiarising was pretty blatant, you either took it straight out of the Encyclopedia Britannica or you didn't. It was pretty straightforward to pick up when plagiarism happened. Even Turnitin now are looking at small percentages of false positives. So what happens when you write your assignment and you get told, oh, sorry, you plagiarised, that was Turnitin? How do you defend against that? You've got 3% or 4% or 10% giving a false positive. How do you know that it's a false positive and not a real positive? And the other swing and roundabout is all those kids who know there are false positives out there go, well, it's worth the risk. So a lot of that discussion is around when is it worth the risk to do it and when does academic integrity actually cut in? And that line is going to be very difficult to discern.
With the current assessment regime that exists.
My daughter's getting flagged a lot at the moment for AI and plagiarism, and she is not using AI. She's the most studious student, and for some reason, their algorithm just keeps flagging her. And like, as you're totally right, how does she defend herself? Does she have to hire a lawyer or some sort of person to defend her? Like she's 15, you know. But if she's doing that, if she's at uni and she's an adult, you know, are people going to have to? Maybe there's going to be a whole load of AI lawyers that defend people who are so good.
We'll switch to the next question.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Given AI is very integrated to every single like Canva or from Canva to everywhere, it's like AI. And we use AI. I promote AI as well. Without AI, I think, I don't know what I'll do. Even Grammarly, Grammarly use AI. So how would this impact intellectual property from your view? Intellectual property.
It's a good question, right? I've got a few friends that are artists, and they're very upset about the AI art that's coming out now that's potentially taking their work, and what is original artwork anymore. You know, there's little snippets of a hand here or a nose here, or that's in art, but you've got that now in technology as well. If I write a line of code and I contribute to an open source project, and I think I've contributed to a GPL free software project, you know, that has all of this great, you know, non-commercial ethos, and then suddenly I'm now part of some Google's new service that they're selling to you to help you, or Copilot, then, you know, that, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I know some people that are active, very, very active open source developers who are pretty annoyed that they wrote this code with a certain license attached to it, which is now being put into something totally different. So you're going to have that in also. I don't have a great answer to your question. I think it's going to create a lot of work for lawyers. Like the other job that we should all maybe encourage people to get into if you want to earn loads of money is like AI law, because they're going to be very busy.
That IP question is really the same question you asked, but just that's a commercial application. What we were discussing was an educational application, is whether it's your work or not, whether it's your commercial body of work. And the answer is exactly the same. The onus will be on either you to defend yourself or prove that it's yours. And as you said, to what extent are you going to employ lawyers to chase this work down or defend your child at a university for that body of work? Where does that go? And the reality is, I think we've realised there's no answers to that. It's going to be very difficult to prove. And there's always that answer. Well, we'll create software that will come behind it and chase it. We all know that methodology doesn't actually work because it's always actually behind. So that is actually not the answer either. I think it's still about cognitive development in young people, teaching them those thinking skills, those creativity skills that are absolutely critical. And if we can do that, then we still create amazing products that AI is still catching up. Because remember, AI is still playing catch up, but we still need to keep forging ahead of it, if you like. That's the only answer I think I can have. And if you don't, then you will get swallowed up, I think.
Do you think there will be a trend towards localized large language models, such as an EQ LLM or Queensland Health, or we should continue to trend towards very large commercialised ones?
So a bit of both. So we're finding that there are bespoke products that are looking at small things and then the large language models, but the large language models are catching up. So if you look at ChatGPT 3, 3.5, 4, GPT 3.5 was English. GPT-4, bucket load of languages. So it's rapidly developing, and it's developing in areas where it doesn't have good levels of knowledge. So it will focus on medical, it will focus on all sorts of different things. It's about just feeding the right information into the model. But when Kelvin talks about developing our own software, it's very difficult because our models are fragile, because what we say in Australia, what we say in Brisbane, is different to what we say in Townsville. And how I write in a medical record here is very different to how I write in a medical record in Victoria. So there's a place for the bespoke stuff and there's a place for the big stuff. And I think the bespoke stuff will happen where it needs local nuance. And where that local nuance is really important. And they'll be in safety critical areas. So I don't think they'll do it for everything, but things like health and I don't even think so much education, but where you can kill someone or do something really bad, I think you'll have that local nuance.
The common language platform, Tony was in health for years. I've been in education for years. I never saw any overlap. I've got a son-in-law that's in defence. There is no overlap. So in terms of a common thing, I think that's a massive thing that government should consider doing, to actually integrate their platforms, because at the moment they're not. They need to be.
I'm just going to quickly add, it's not just languages. It's also like industry sectors and things like that. We're doing a little bit of work. We did quite a lot of work in insurance, so dealing with the speak of like insurance underwriters, which, you'd think, as you said before, some of these large language models wouldn't be able to cope with that, but they actually are pretty good. So, at one point we were like, I know we have to make an insurance specific AI that just knows about all our terminology and isn't going to get confused by, the nuances in the English language, but actually they're quite good, which is a bit, I don't know if it's scary, it's quite impressive that they can do quite weird esoteric subjects. So yeah, when it screws up though, that's why I'm a bit worried in insurance, because that can be a very big mistake, right? I struggled to get insurance recently because I had to get business insurance renewed. I don't know if anyone gets business insurance. If anyone here does AI, if you've listed AI on that form, when you get business insurance, that is a huge black mark. I had 7 insurance companies, 5 rejected me outright. One was half, and I finally got the 7th one to accept me as a client because I'd listed AI on my, and also blockchain. AI and blockchain were 2 massive black marks, which is a shame because those 2 technologies have a lot of scope for good, but insurance companies are dealing in risk, they're dealing in numbers, the actuaries are doing the maths, and it's like, nah, not risking it. And there's court cases, when there's court cases that are active at this moment, especially in blockchain, they're like, nah, we're not going anywhere near that. So that's going to be interesting as you start putting AI into your businesses. Just be aware that does, in the view of an insurer, raise your risk profile quite considerably.
I work in education, primarily tertiary education, and there's a lot of, I guess you've sort of said, there's a lot of fear in it. But some of us are also looking at it as it's just a better hammer, it's just a tool, right? So what kind of things do we think is a good way to teach students to use these kinds of tools, and what kind of things, I guess, does business want to see from students that have learned these newer tools?
I can't comment on necessarily the business applications, but certainly I agree. We've been working in my particular school on how to show teachers how to embrace this way of working and utilise it. So for us, it's about actually, say you've got to write a couple of paragraphs on something. So the teacher will actually pump that straight in, or they've already cached it, done that work at night, because of course you can't access it at school. So they'll show what was done last night. And they'll actually, together then, they're asked to critique what ChatGPT created, the kids with the teacher. So the teacher said, this is what I put in. I actually put the assessment in last night. This is what came out. Can you make this better? And so what they might start to do is deconstruct what would actually make this. Well, firstly, they'd grade it and decide what that would actually get against the criteria. So every assessment piece has a criteria matrix. they would then decide as a group, what might this piece of work actually achieve if it was actually submitted? Then the question would be, what would you do to enhance or improve its outcomes on each of the criteria? What would you do for criteria 1 to make this a better piece of work? After the discussions take place, it's then now do. Actually make this better and actually see what this will do. And then after they do that, peer mark those pieces and see how the improvements have occurred. So there's a very small example where instead of just saying, make sure you've got academic integrity, don't you use ChatGPT, and then marking whatever's handed in, that's actually embracing the product and actually and showing how to make it even better, the product better, the assessment better.
Okay, I'd probably get the privilege of the last question. There is a court case going on at the moment. There's a Victorian mayor that's suing OpenAI because an article was written where it accused him of rorting, some government rort and corruption. But he was actually the whistleblower. But again, GPT can sort of hallucinate the facts and get things mixed up. So Mark, you talked about skill sets. I think critical analysis is one. But do you think generally most users are just going to be lazy and the ability, disinformation is probably, could flood the internet just with a lot of disinformation that people are just too lazy to apply critical analysis to?
There will be two camps. I think what will happen is for a lot of people, it's about saving time. I think a lot of people, kids included, are time poor. And if you give someone an onerous task that's going to obviously take days and weeks or whatever, or hours to do, you would be absolutely crazy not to start there. So I don't call that lazy. I think it was what you were saying, using a smarter tool to create the product. If you rely on that as your product, now you're being bloody lazy. If that's what you think is the answer, now that's just being slack and lazy. And that's what we're trying to do at our school, is say to a child, you submit that, you're taking the piss. That's not how it should be. But if you can hammer that and tighten it and sharpen it and do this and address the criteria, make this more, so in a business application, create a product that's more user-friendly for your client, if you want to use that sort of language, then that's where it's at. But certainly it's going to be two camps, Kelvin. It's going to be those kids that are just bludging, or adults, trying to take the easy road. And there'll be those that just, like myself, treat it as a starting point. It saves me 2 or 3 hours initially, and then I sharpen it to something that becomes mine. I think that's how the smarter users will use it.
He's the optimist, I'm the pessimist. So we balance yin and yang. I look at buildings where a concrete path is around the outside and there's the way that everybody goes. And we're basically lazy. And so most people will actually go that easy pathway. And so that's the wariness we have to put into it. Us in the room, we're probably the rule followers and the ones who would go around the outside and take the longer path and enjoy the plants planted around the edges on the way. But we are on that path pretty much on our own, and everyone else is on the different path. So what we put in place to manage that will be really important, because we are the anomalies. And most people will just be banging down the easy pathway, using it to the best of their ability to save time, to make money, to do whatever. It's the same when COVID was on. Everyone followed rules, but the drug dealers didn't. So, there will be people who follow rules and people who don't. And most people won't.
Steve, we're going to write better code or just churn out a lot of
Yeah,
ordinary code?
I might just pick on code for a moment, seeing as that's my area. I think, so far with the code, the way it's doing its coding, it's using, a large database of code going back, could be even 40 years. I'm sure there's some COBOL and all sorts of stuff in there, maybe 50 years plus. We need to still be writing code, but then I guess the flip side of it might be that, this AI is going to get so good. At the moment, there's a human in the loop, but there's talk about, AI is creating code from scratch. They get involved in the testing process, the feedback process. Who's to say an AI can't just create an entire system without a human involved? So then do we get to the point where we can't even understand what the hell it wrote? How do we test it? Like, it's Kelvin's company is like testing, it's going to be interesting. We talk about AGI, and we think, that's like like human level AI, but this is going to be superhuman AI. Like we get to a point where the AI is so intelligent and smart. How you define those words, I don't know, but that we can't actually understand what it wrote. So how do we audit that and test that? And so humans, I don't know, I feel like humans need to be involved in this, very closely. There are some people that just say, well, it just doesn't matter. We'll just let the AIs run everything, and humans will just be like Star Trek, right? Where we just do art and we explore the galaxy and the AIs run everything. But I don't know, that can also take a very dystopian pathway as well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, let's finish off with a quick poll. Put up your hand if you're optimistic about the future and how some of the tools might fit in. Yeah. Put up your hand if you're a little bit concerned and cautious about. And put up both hands if you're both.
You can certainly sit on the fence.
Yeah. So I think I am optimistic, but yeah, certainly there's a bit of cautious optimism. I think. Cool. So yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for the discussion. I think it's a very topical thing at the moment. It's discussions I'm having with my staff practically every day about how it's being used and what we're being used for, and what's our role in that future. So yeah, good conversation, and please stick around for more conversation. Just to wrap up as well, like we do charge a fee for coming in the mornings now. Again, to make sure people show up when we're doing the catering, but we actually donate that money to a charity of choice. So so we pick one of you. So Rick Jewson, Rick, you get to nominate a $500 donation to a charity of your choice.
I've just joined Oz Harvest, so I think they would.
Oz Harvest.
Oz Harvest.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Rick. We'll donate that money to Oz Harvest for your fee for coming this morning. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to the next Gold Coast IT Forum meeting. Actually, let me announce the date that is written down here. Brett, do we have a topic yet for the next meeting?
We're going to ask ChatGPT.
Ask ChatGPT. Yep. So the next meeting is 15th of August. I actually did ask ChatGPT, the ChatGPT 4, going, how should people develop skills to reduce impact of job loss because of AI like ChatGPT? It came back with quite a motherhood sort of conversation with 5 points. It said upskilling and reskilling, soft skills development, cross-functional experience, entrepreneurship, and finally networking. So at least you guys have got the 6th one for being here this morning. So thanks, ChatGPT. You're looking after us all. Okay, thank you, everybody.